I'm retired from the city of Detroit. Worked for the city for 30 years. I live in the city. I pay taxes in the city. Mayor Bing went behind the union representatives, the pension boards. He went behind the back of the city council to do the bidding of investors and bankers and outstate politicians to loot the city of $6 billion in pension assets. The City of Detroit pension funds are fully funded, and they are proposed to be merged with an outstate MERS pension fund that is not fully funded. Although they say that our pension benefits will be guaranteed, in fact they won't be. Highland Park had their pension fund thrown out of MERS and people didn't get their checks. So this points to a basic fact that the so-called elected city government here does not represent poor and working people. In my neighborhood, we're fighting to keep our homes occupied while people are homeless. There's no excuse for having a vacant house in this city as long as people are homeless, who are doubling up with their families.
Thank you very much.
We can't do that anymore. There has to be an agenda for working and poor people.
Right.
There's enough wealth in this city still to give each of us a decent life and work to do.
It is. It's enough resources.
One of the facts is that in 1935, 75 years ago in May, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed into law the Works Progress Administration. Over 8.5 million people were employed just there, and millions more through the Civilian Conservation Corps. Why isn't the mayor supporting Joanne Watson's program for a urban Marshall Plan? Why isn't the mayor of Detroit going to Washington and saying we need jobs in the city of Detroit?
Right.
We need jobs, we need them now.
Right.
It was done 75 years ago. It can be done again today. There are things here in the city of Detroit that were constructed. Tall Elementary School on the west side was constructed during the WPA. Western High School, a lot of the sewers, the infrastructure that we're using today were constructed by WPA workers. WPA provided all sorts of education, all sorts of community help, and people had jobs. In my neighborhood, in Northwest Detroit, we need jobs all throughout the city. Over 100,000 people in this city need a job today. They need an income, a decent income, not the trickle-down corporate stuff that's being talked about by Mayor Bing.
Right on.
Right now, we need to fight for those jobs. We can win them.
Right on,
we can win them. We can tell the federal government, don't bail out the banks.
Right.
Bail out the people. Bail out the workers. Bail out our neighborhoods.
Yes.
Let's get a fraction of the military budget that's being spent overseas to bomb innocent people. Let's use that money to build up our city. That's what I say. WPA now, we can fight and we can win.
Amen. Right on.
Okay, you want a moratorium on what? Why this little demonstration today?
Okay, we're here to illustrate the role of the financial institutions and the multinational corporations and the indebtedness and potential receivership and bankruptcy of the city of Detroit. We're totally opposed to the budget that was issued last week by Mayor Dave Bing. We feel it does not get to the actual cause of the crisis in the city of Detroit. For decades, this city has been bled of jobs. It's been victims of predatory lending, to redlining, and all types of other machinations by the banks and the multinational corporations. We're calling for a moratorium on foreclosures, evictions, utility shutoffs, also a moratorium on school closings, as well as any effort to right-size or downsize the city of Detroit. None of these programs to right-size or downsize the city of Detroit have been discussed with the people of this city. These ideas are coming from the banks, they're coming from the multinational corporations, from the private foundations who historically have been in league with those forces who have destroyed the city of Detroit, as opposed to providing jobs and housing and health care for the people of this city.
So what do you want the mayor to do?
We want him to apply to the governor for the declaration of an economic state of emergency, which would in effect provide an immediate moratorium on foreclosures and evictions and utility shutoffs, also to convene a citywide meeting of community organizations and churches and unions to figure out what the actual direction of the city is going to be. We cannot allow the Kresge Foundation, the Skillman Foundation, the Citizen Research Council to set the agenda for the future of Detroit. We want a people's agenda, and that's what it's going to take in order to bring about any type of development and any type of stability here in the city of Detroit.
Any final thoughts?
My thought is that people have to come out through their community organizations, through their unions, through their churches, to get involved in this debate, to stop Mayor Bing, to stop the emergency financial manager of the Detroit Public Schools, to actually bring about some type of democratic discussion and democratic debate on the future of the city of Detroit.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
During the Depression, under conditions very much like what we're suffering in Detroit, it was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. We have written Mayor Bing, we've met with aides of his to demand the declaration of the state of economic emergency, and we're going to keep pushing it. And we're not talking about the state sending a receiver in like with Bob. We're talking about a people's state of economic emergency that guarantee the people's rights to housing, to utilities, through a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures.
And how has the mayor responded to this?
Up to now, we met with him. He said he was going to get back to us. He has not. We think what's indicative of what the mayor's attitude is when we looked at the city budget, which we recently went through, and we went through his budget, his figures, and we see that the city pays $74 million in debt service to the banks. It's paying $96 million for what they call a POC hedge fund, which is a fund set up to deposit casino tax revenue to pay off previous bonds so that tax revenue doesn't even go to the people of Detroit. He has a new bond he issued that's guaranteed by state revenue sharing money, which means we're not even going to see the benefits of revenue sharing money. We live in a city where the Detroit News recently pointed out that in many months, 80% of state aid for schools pays debt service to the bank. Unfortunately, what we've seen is city government has become subservient to the banks, the same banks that have foreclosed on people's homes through illegal, fraudulent, predatory loans, 85% subprime loans. So we know the mayor, unfortunately what we believe is the mayor, whether it's Bing or Bob, they seem to be subservient to the banks. It's going to take the people waking up, and really today is to launch a campaign to educate people on the role of these banks and putting a stranglehold on Detroit, and to educate people to say it's time to stand up and to say people come before the banks. Our rights to housing, education, health care must be guaranteed, and that's what we're here about, and we're going to be fighting this all summer long.
Okay. Obviously the mayor inherited a lot of these problems. Is there any kind of recourse of action he can take?
Well, again, we think the recourse is to deal with the problems by declaring a state of people's economic emergency. That's the recourse that he could do right now. And that's what we're asking him to do. Again, under a state of people's economic emergency, there's all sorts of authority. The U.S. Supreme Court held that in a state of emergency, a period like this, where there's massive unemployment, layoffs, it's comparable to the 1930s. The people's right to survive supersedes contract clause of the Constitution. We're saying it's time for the mayor to stand up for the people. Don't worry about paying off the debts to the banks. First, worry about keeping people in their homes, keeping people's lights and heat on, and helping the people of the city to survive. It's the people that he's there to represent, not the banks and corporations.
Okay.